Suspense is killing me. There it is.
All right, it's official. We are live now, back with our second episode of the Ascend podcast. Today on the podcast, I have Coach Mahmood and Coach Tristan here joining me. And what we're going to do today is we're going to dive deep down into the different programs and track offerings that we have here with Ascend Athlete and talk about each one a little bit more in depth to help you decide which one is the best fit for you, kind of some pros and cons of each one and how they best fit your goals so we can come up with a combo to help you in your training and to get there efficiently. Awesome. So the first thing that we're going to start with is we're going to talk about our 3 blog options that we have here with Ascend. And a blog is a reoccurring subscription that you are moving through the course of a training program with a community. So for instance, right now with all of our blogs, we are in week 1 of a training cycle. So at any point, if you were to hop in and join in on one of our blogs, you would start concurrent with the rest of our community. So you would not start at week 1 of a given training cycle. You would hop in with where we are currently progressing. So that way you're moving forward with our entire team. You'll have a community to compare scores with and kind of train virtually with and have that support system. So we have our entire blog community doing the same workout and same programming at the
Same time.
blog. Be $39.99 a month for a subscription. To talk about that one just a little bit more in depth, I'm going to hand it over to Mahmood because he does a lot of our affiliate integration and kind of planning for this model and this track. All right, Mahmood, tell us a little bit about what an athlete would expect and the structure and goal of the Train blog.
Yeah, so as you said, Emily, for the Train blog, we do offer you kind of an experience that you would have as a virtual class, right? So let's say you have a home gym and you don't have the capability to go to a gym that is close by. You're in an area where you don't have a nearby gym, or you, for example, have something in life that just you can't allocate the time to go to the gym. This is the closest thing that you can do to a 60-minute to almost 75 minutes workout. It is a CrossFit based. It is structured like you would be in a class. So it would have its warm up. You would have your strength or skill piece. You would have your Metcon, potentially some accessory work after that. And it will be in here in Houston, this is what we use for our gym in Crossfigurator Heights. This is the closest thing that they do. And it is designed for an athlete who would like to either compete in the open, do well in local competitions, potentially even make it to quarterfinals. But at the same time, it is very, very scalable and changeable to be for an athlete who would like to just stay healthy, stay fit, and keep just working out on a regular basis. And I think this is a good way to go into. We can also work on skill work, or we can work on finding the notes to make sure that we're following the right path as we go through the workout, versus I am just doing a lot more work than I need to be doing at this point. So to sum up the track, I want to think about time based. So I don't have more than 60 to 90 minutes at most, and I don't have the capability to use that time to travel to a gym. 2, I don't have a gym nearby, and I have a gym that is capable. I am capable to do a good session of training at home or any different vicinity. And 3, I am not trying to make it to a semifinal. I am trying to potentially either stay healthy, stay fit, and or compete locally in the open, or potentially even make it to quarterfinals.
Awesome. So if I am doing CrossFit at home and our blogs are something that I'm looking at, does Train require all of the equipment necessary to do CrossFit? Like what type of equipment do I need to do if I'm doing it at home?
So ideally, the more equipment you have, the less deviation you need from our blog. We don't usually have any super complicated equipment. It is mostly the machines that you can find in the gym, and usually they're interchangeable. So you can, if you have just a rower, for example, you can change out a piece of C2 bike or a piece of assault bike for the rower. You will probably need a rig, for a pull-up rig, a barbell, maybe a rope, a box, the essentials for any CrossFit-based workout. So I would say you won't need, for example, a tall rope to climb or a pegboard or a sled or anything like that that is requiring extra space or extra abnormal things that you can't find in a home gym. But the ideal home gym setup, again, including a pull-up bar, a barbell, rope, box, potentially wall ball, and a machine, at least like a machine, or even if you don't have a machine and you're willing to deviate to running, that's another option. But yeah, pretty basic setup. You don't really need much more. And think about it like, what would you do in an hour class? That would be probably the best idea to think about when you're thinking of a setup versus, oh, I'm gonna stay for longer and I'm gonna just explore other skills or things that I will find in a semifinal or a very high complex competition. Yeah.
Awesome. Tristan, since you're kind of the head and leading our programming, can you talk a little bit about how we start and we have the train program, but how it progresses into compete? And then we'll kind of talk about transitioning from the train blog into the compete blog and kind of how they vary and what an athlete would be seeing in the differences between the two.
Yeah. So train, if we look at that as kind of a base program, right, and it's the simplest, then we move up to compete. And that program is for people who want to be competitive in the open. They want to be competitive at the quarterfinal level. Obviously, with quarterfinals, there's a huge amount of people in quarterfinals, and there's a large variation in how competitive you can be, right? Like you can be top 1,000, top 500, top 250, and then obviously vying for a semifinal spot. So one of the things that immediately changes is our need to train a little bit longer, just so we can have a little bit more fitness in the bank. So compete is on average 90 minutes a day. Sometimes we touch close to that 2-hour mark, but it's pretty rare, especially for this time of the season. That'll come about a little bit more later when we're just really trying to be as absolutely fit as possible. The other things that kind of build off of train is the need for a little more equipment. We do need you to kind of have ropes, some GHDs, sandbags are a good training tool. We do utilize sleds and some of those more obscure things that you may not see in train, but still not quite all the bells and whistles, so to speak, like, pegs and things like that we would see in a higher level program for people who are kind of a step above. There is a little more emphasis on building your capacity in certain movements versus developing the skill of certain movements. We still do cyclical skill work pieces. Obviously, people who can make quarterfinals right now can still have very large skill limiters in certain movements. So those skill progressions are built in, but it's not necessarily as frequent and as touching all the different skills. If you're doing compete, we kind of are looking for you to be able to do some butterfly pull-ups, some chest to bar, a couple ring muscle ups here and there. You don't necessarily have to have great capacity in those things, but hopefully you have those skills or are very close to them when moving into the compete program so that you can really get the most out of that program itself.
Okay.
Yeah.
So just touching on kind of as we're transitioning from talking about train to compete, some of the major differences is first price goes up to, it's $59.99 a month to subscribe to compete. And you get a little bit longer duration, a little more volume. So we're moving from targeting around that 1 hour to an hour, 20-minute mark up into 90 minutes to 2 hours around that, touching on that for compete. So we're upping the volume. The other thing that we're kind of changing is moving away from a little bit more focus on skill development and a little bit more into capacity with some of those higher level skills, figuring that our goal is to compete. Mahmoud, I want to kind of cross over to you real quick and just chat a little bit about how this applies to the affiliate and how we implement having train and compete type programming available for all of our athletes at the affiliate level so they can kind of choose their track as well.
100%. So for example, I'm going to use our headquarters here at Crossfigurator Heights. And so we kind of have the compete programming or a kind of like an open path between train and compete at the gym. We do offer a 60-minute class, and that will be almost the full amount that train offers. So we have a warm-up, a strength or skill, and a metcon. And then we do have a optional piece after that is post-class for people who want to work on their skills, work on being more competitive, whatever their choice or their fitness goals are. And that's usually either one piece from train or the full volume from compete, or even sometimes we kind of tailor it towards the affiliate, or we give them one of two pieces to choose from. So they get to choose between either lifting piece, gymnastics piece, or a conditioning piece, for example, which if you think about the compete track, it would be all of those added volume in total, not just pick and choose. And we try to add a little bit more. So in some of the days we do deviate a little bit and we try and introduce some skill work. So just pure skill work, less conditioning, trying to add that flavor to people who do not have all the skills covered yet, so that come the open or come next cycle that we are improving on skills that we don't have, and we're not just trying to ignore that weakness that we can because it's not like in the workouts. That being said, or like if I'm scaling it in the workouts just to get the intensity and meet the stimulus, I don't get to practice it. That being said, we kind of bring in again, and that's based on like whatever affiliate reaches out to me and they were like, we want to work on this population. You get to sit down with the affiliate head coach, and we're trying to figure out what their goals are, and that's where some deviations might come from our blog. But for example, again, I'm going to use our affiliate as an example. We do have our Thursday gymnastic skill work. So because a lot of people in our classes are trying to improve on their gymnastics, and we don't want to we want to give them the freedom to work on whatever skill they're lagging at. So we give them a 10-minute window with different progressive skills or drills to do for each gymnastic movement that they choose, and they stick with that skill for 8 weeks. And as they go through the weeks, the drills get a little bit more complicated, a little bit more progressive, until we get close to the movement itself in the last 2 or 3 weeks, where they try and attempt the skill that they've been after for 8 weeks. It has got a lot of success on the first cycle, so we're bringing it back to the ALP cycle, hoping for some people are choosing to work on the same skill again, and some people are trying to choose a different skill that they didn't use. So
yeah.
One thing you're good.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to highlight, just so people have a little bit more clarity on what we mean between the differences between the skill work for train and the skill work you might see in something like compete. Train, Mamu just did a good job of highlighting, it's very structured progression. Whereas with compete, we might do something like that in the off season a couple times and things like that. But where we're at now in our ALP cycle and things like that, kind of coming into the preseason, is where your pieces might look like every 90 seconds, 5 ring muscle ups. You can approach that as skill work, right? Like I'm going to do 5 perfect ring muscle ups. I'm not just going to get up there and flail around on the rings. So that can be a form of skill work for those athletes who are in compete, where they can refine their skills a little bit more. But it's off the basis of you have the ability to do that skill a couple times.
Yeah, I was going to head over to you really quick because I wanted to touch on, we talked about time difference daily, the difference between train and compete, but we didn't talk about days of the week. So how many days a week of programming are we looking at as far as structure between compete and train?
So for compete, we're looking at training days on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Thursday, there is zone 2 work, which I highly encourage people to do. Some people do not do it, but
you're going to compete, you should do it.
If you're on compete, you need to do zone 2 work. That's my hill to die on, I guess, and it's fine. And then another training day Friday and another training day Saturday. So you have one full rest day on Sunday, and then Thursday, even with doing zone 2 work, would be classified as an active recovery day.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And I would say for train, similar type structure, we do still have the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday structure. Thursday is optional. So we put it in there completely as optional. For compete, highly recommended. So we're getting that volume of 6 days a week and building that base, which is really important for recovery. When that's kind of our goal as far as competing. Train, optional. If you need to get in the gym and you need to move because you're a busybody person and you need to do something 6 days, it's there and available for you, but not mandatory like we suggest for compete. Cool. Okay, so I think we touched on train and compete pretty well. I want to move into, we do have one more additional blog option, and that is also $59.99 a month, but this one is a little bit different. It's special because it is actually invite only. So we have Ascend Pro, which is our kind of Mac Daddy of all of our tracks for competitive athletes. And I'm going to turn it over to Tristan here just in a second so he can kind of dig deeper into the programming and what Pro has to offer. But the goal and the intent is to get athletes to the CrossFit Games with this track. So this track is extensive in the amount of volume and time commitment that it requires. And it is invite only because we strongly encourage and vet the athletes coming into this program to make sure that this is what fits their goals. So that way we are not giving too much volume and kind of overloading an athlete not prepared for it. So Tristan, go ahead, take it away. Let's talk about Pro for a little bit.
Yeah, just to come off of what you just said about the invite only kind of thing with Pro, it's not because it's some super secret squirrel sauce. It's because if you haven't spent a lot of time doing the sport already, you don't have the prerequisite skills and movement quality, and you've already done a good bit of volume, you can get much better results doing compete versus needing that Pro track. So that's a big reason. We don't want people to just jump in that Pro track because it's Pro and it sounds cool, and then 3 months in, their labrum is shredded and they have low back pain because they just weren't ready for it, right? So yeah, Pro, like you said, it's kind of the Mac Daddy program. This is designed for people who are trying to be competitive at the semifinal level and go to the CrossFit Games. So you're looking at right now, while we're still in the preseason, a 2-hour, 2.5-hour training session. Basically every single training day. We have the Zone 2 work on Thursdays. That's mandatory. You have a full rest day on Sundays. And the big thing with Pro that will be different as the season progresses is we're going to be doing 2 sessions a day. Like, we're going to be doing a lot of volume. We're going to be doing a lot of high skill work. Pro is where we see pegs, high volume legless rope climbs, 200-pound sandbags for the guys, 150 pounds for the ladies, some of the more odd object things. And then in terms of the classic CrossFit stuff, you're going to do 100 to 120 chest to bar in a workout. You're going to do 150 toe to bar. You're going to do 100 overhead squats, right? Like, so it's just that volume component that we've found is necessary for people to be successful in the sport, especially I think since the kind of new age of quarterfinals and semifinals. You have to be able to take that kind of volume. You have to be able to apply intensity through that kind of volume. And then you have to be able to recover through that kind of volume. So that is a big reason, I think, for eventually in the season, Pro will move to 2 sessions a day. And right now, even though it's doable in 2 to 2.5 hours, it's a hefty training day. Like, you're working, and if you're doing it in 2 hours, you're hustling through each piece. So with that track, you need to be able to do all the skills. You need to be able to do them in a good amount of volume to start with, right? There are going to be pieces in the Pro track that if you were even a pretty good quarterfinals level athlete, you would look at it and just be like, I cannot perform that. Whereas the athletes we have on the Pro track doing them, they're doing it at intensity, right? And that's just a huge difference in strength and fitness and skill level. So it is really a high level training program that is designed to make you really stinking fit and really stinking strong. So.
And you mentioned the 2 sessions. Sorry, go ahead.
Nope, you're okay, Mahmood. I just wanted to say I wanted to clarify a little bit what we mean by invite only. It is open registration. So if you're out there and you're interested in jumping on board with Ascend, reach out to one of our coaches, DM us on Instagram, shoot me an email. Emily at Ascent Athlete Training, and let's kind of talk about what you've been doing previously for volume and what you've been training and kind of where you've been in the past, so we can determine if pro is right for you. And if it is the right track for you, you are ready for that volume and for that intensity, then we invite anyone, it is welcome to come in and join. So you don't have to be approached by one of us and invited to come to the track. You're more than welcome to kind of reach out to us, and we'll just talk about your training background and history and make sure that it is the right fit for you and you're prepared.
Yeah.
Mahmood,
So is it sorry, just off your point, so it's more like application based kind of?
Yeah,
that's
probably a better way to put it.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then I was gonna ask Tristan, because you were talking about the 2 sessions a day. What if I'm an athlete that's doing any of those tracks and I can't fit it all in one session? I would ask you, is it okay if I do it, split it up into 2 sessions?
I would say, so for our train athletes, I don't think you need to do 2 sessions a day for the most part to be healthy in life and compete at local competitions. For those kind of athletes, I'm much more interested in you applying intensity to your training than pushing volume where you may not need it. For our compete athletes, that's totally fine. If you do have a kind of weird life structure where you can train, 45 minutes in the morning in your garage, and then you hit an affiliate on the way home to do the more, gym stuff, that's totally fine. And then for the pro people as well, our pro athletes, if you need to break it up, that's fine. As we move into the season, like I alluded to, you will need to break it up. Like I will tell you to break it up because it'd just be too much to do with any kind of intensity in one session. So,
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And then another question would be would you recommend to stick to the order of pieces?
Yes. They are written in an order for a reason. There are some exceptions. There are some athletes who have exceptions in the order in which they should prioritize pieces. Absolutely. But for the most part, myself and Ricky, we write the strength and the pieces in a particular order for the time of season, and that should be how you follow it.
Awesome. Okay. Before we kind of close up and move on from our 3 blog options, anything else that we want to make sure that we kind of put out there for blogs?
I had something I wanted to touch on with the blogs, just for people who might be jumping on, right? You mentioned, if you come in the middle of a cycle, you start where we're at in that cycle. So Ricky with the strength work and myself with even a lot of the Metcons volumes and progressions, we're very progressive, and we move through things in a linear fashion where we're kind of building on top of each other. So depending on the program someone's coming from, they might jump into our squats right now, and they didn't do that really gross high volume squat cycle. So they may not necessarily be ready to hit the intensities that our athletes are doing right now in their back squat work or something like that. That's okay. I would always recommend people don't stress about it too much. Take a little bit off in terms of your percentage work and things like that. Get in the reps, and in a couple weeks, your body will kind of acclimatize to what we're doing, and you will be able to knock out that work as prescribed. But I know that's a question that people would have is, okay, I'm jumping into this, and you guys have doubles at 90% on back squat, and I haven't touched 90% in 2 years. And it's like, okay, let's take some weight off and just do some heavy doubles today, and then build into that progression.
Yeah, that's a great point. And that's true with any time you're switching programs. Even if you're looking at kind of going from train up to compete and you're starting to add some of those extra sessions, just being really mindful of how your body's feeling, how you are responding to the additional load, the additional volume, and trusting yourself through that transition to kind of take a step back if you need to, until your body does acclimate to the transition, the change.
Yeah.
Cool. Anything else on blogs? Awesome. All right, let's move on to a few of our specialty programs. So we do have a few different options as far as specialty coaching, and that includes gymnastics, weightlifting, and a pregnancy and postpartum program. After we kind of touch on these 3 really quick, I will circle back and we'll talk about one-on-one individualized coaching, which I know is what everyone's really excited about. But first up is our pregnancy and postpartum program. Coach Dara heads up our pregnancy and postpartum program. She was my coach as I was recovering through kind of pregnancy and postpartum and kind of getting back into compete. I am planning to have her on the podcast, and we'll go really in depth in that program in the next couple of weeks. So we'll have a lot of information coming out for you guys. But the basis is this is $89.99 a month, and it is an individualized one-on-one program. So this is our one specialty program that is completely individualized. You are paying for a coach to kind of help you progress through that recovery program and to create programs specifically for you. So we do have that option for our female athletes. And then we have gymnastics, which is open to everyone. Coach Hattie Canyo is our gymnastics coach. And this one's a little unique. We have a couple different options. We have 1 skill and 2 skill gymnastics. These programs are, again,
we're having technical difficulties. There you are, Em. Circle back to what you were just saying. You're good.
Okay, not too much. Okay,
No.
So our gymnastics programs are intended to be layered on top of a traditional training program. So if you are a train or a compete athlete and you have one deficiency in gymnastics, let's say ring muscle ups, that you really want extra attention, extra coaching on, adding a 1 skill gymnastics package would be a perfect fit for you. We have 1 skill, which is $129.99 a month, and 2 skill, which is $169.99 a month. The way that works is you get to pick your skill. So if you choose 1 skill, then you get to do either ring muscle ups, chest to bar, wherever you kind of want to have that extensive training. And Coach Hattie will build a strength and accessory program around that. And she also does weekly video review. So you would be communicating back and forth with her directly on that 1 skill that is your goal, trying with the sole intent of improvement in that one area. Cool.
What about L-sit press to handstand?
I don't think we've had anyone request that skill yet, but she could probably help you. And now past the games and our experience this year, it's in the tool set. So probably our most common is ring muscle up. Everybody loves those ring muscle ups. If you're going for 2 skill gymnastics program, the $169.99 a month, you can choose 2 skills at a time. So I usually recommend varying it by kind. So potentially a pushing and a pulling skill if you're really wanting to do 2 at the same time. So choosing something like either a bar muscle up or ring muscle up and coupling that with either handstand walking, strict handstand push up. So you are getting variety in that extra strength and drill programming. Cool. Again, also in the plans to have Hattie on the podcast, and we'll dive a lot deeper into our gymnastics programming once we get there. Last one I wanted to touch on is we do have a weightlifting blog. So we have Ascend Weightlifting, which is headed up by Coach Ricky. And there's a couple ways that you can be a part of our Ascend Weightlifting team. You can do one-on-one coaching with Ricky, which we'll talk about our one-on-one here in a second. And that would be a completely customized program. Or you can also sign up for our weightlifting. This is more of actually a blog option, but it's a specialty skill. And that would be 3 times a week. And with that, that's $59.99 a month. So blog subscription, hop into the cycle where we're at, similar to what we had talked about before, but only Olympic lifting to add on to that. So those are our specialty programs that we kind of offer now. I'm going to get into the good stuff.
Before we jump into that, I wanted to ask you a question I think people would be curious about. For the pregnancy and postpartum program, is that only for previously competitive athletes who then have a kid, or is that something that can be done with any kind of athlete of any skill level?
Yeah, I would say it can be done with an athlete at any skill level. It can also be done with an athlete with any background. So it does not have to be CrossFit. The goal of our pregnancy and postpartum programming is to get you back and recovered safely to do whatever sport and activity you love. So a lot of it is just broad general GPP, recovery, core strength, balance work to get you prepared to go back into what other athletic endeavor that you really love. If it's CrossFit, will help you transition back into CrossFit and focus kind of on some of those movements further in the recovery. If it's distance running, she'll focus a lot more kind of on preparing you for that postpartum.
Okay.
Cool. Awesome. That was a good question. Any other questions kind of about those 3?
For the weightlifting blog, it is also like it's a cyclical blog that It's more for developing strength and positional strength compared to just learning how to lift, correct?
Yeah, so since it is done remotely, and this one is more of a blog structure, so you're not getting the one-on-one interaction like the video review, similar to what we do with like gymnastics. A little bit lower price point. It is an evolving blog. You're hopping in where you're at with that one and progressing through the cycle with everyone. So if you are a part of our affiliate program or here in Houston, we also offer this as our barbell class. So we have it 3 times a week. It's 90 minutes to 2-hour session typically. And it is solely focused on Olympic lifts, power development, and proficiency in those. But if you don't have a background in Olympic lifting yet, I would encourage you to get in-person coaching first before hopping onto a blog program for weightlifting.
Yeah.
And you do like think that it could be added on a CrossFit program versus also being a sole program on its own. So it could be either way.
Yeah, we have a lot of affiliate athletes that actually choose to do that. They do CrossFit, something similar to our train blog, a few days a week, and weightlifting on top of that because they want extra volume specifically in the weightlifting. So I would say those two would be a really good pair.
I'm going to get out ahead of this before the DMs come in. No, it is a bad idea to do weightlifting, ascend barbell, and compete on top of each other.
That would be a lot of volume.
Do not do that.
That would be a lot of volume. Train would be a better complement to an additional weightlifting blog if you are really wanting the extra volume in weightlifting. Yes. And even with that, you might have to compromise a little bit. So if you have 2 hours worth of barbell programming or weightlifting programming that day.
The timing is
I would say maybe don't do the strength that day on train.
Yeah, that's where she was going. We filled in him.
Gotcha. Cool. Okay. Last one. One-on-one. So let's talk.
I think she's okay.
Did I break up? Sorry.
No,
okay.
Yeah.
Moving on, let's talk one-on-ones. So this is kind of the bread and butter of what we do here at Ascend. We offer all kinds of different programs and accessory options, but where I think that we really excel is our one-on-one coaching and development with our athletes. So let's start first with kind of Tristan, and let's talk about the difference between being on a blog versus one-on-one with a coach.
Yeah, I think the biggest difference between any of our blog programs and having individualized one-on-one coaching is everything you're doing is tailored or prescribed for you by that coach, right? So everything from your strength work, your skill work, your monostructural work, your frequency of training, how long you train a day, all of that stuff is goes through that filter of your one-on-one coach. And they're designing that program entirely for yourself.
Coaching joined.
Uh-oh. Did we lose you?
I don't know what happened there, but
We're back?
Okay.
We're back.
Oh, it's all good. But yeah, so it's entirely a program that's made for that one individual person by their one-on-one coach. And it is designed to help them reach whatever goals they have, right? You could hire an Ascend one-on-one coach if you are trying to be a CrossFit Games athlete. If you are trying to make a semi, if you're trying to make quarterfinals, you could also hire an Ascend athlete one-on-one coach if you just want somebody in your corner writing your programming for you so that it's the best program for you for whatever your goals are, right?
Yeah. I think one really big difference between being on a blog versus having one-on-one coaching is with the blog, we do periodize and plan those cycles around the typical CrossFit season. So we're talking the open, quarterfinals, semifinals, games, if we're going there. Those things are all planned for, taken into account when we are periodizing and creating this entire program for the season. However, anything else as an athlete that you might want to do, like Wadapalooza or said qualifier or whatnot, is not taken into account in that programming because we have athletes doing all different things. So with individualized training, can you talk a little bit more about how we would kind of phase and deload and help prepare an individual one-on-one athlete for kind of some different competitions and things?
Yeah, so during the intake call with a one-on-one athlete, they're going to get asked, what goals do they have for the season? What competitions are they wanting to do? What is the biggest competition for their season? What's the competition they want to do the best in? Because we have seen athletes who they want to do well in quarterfinals, but maybe their real goal is to go out and win the fittest experience in the intermediate division or something like that, right? So their training structure for the year, when they peak and when they deload and things like that's going to look a little bit different, and that'll be tailored to them by their individual coach. Whereas, as Emily was saying, if you were on the blog, you're just kind of in it to win it until we get through, the open, quarters, semis, and the games. I think another big difference is the deloading process when you have a one-on-one athlete versus the blog. Obviously, Ricky and myself, we program deloads kind of toward the end of every cycle. There's a little bit of a drop in volume and intensity before we start to ramp back up in the next cycle. But deloading is kind of a fickle science in terms of individual athletes. Some athletes need big deloads. Some athletes don't really need big deloads. And having a one-on-one coach can be really beneficial in helping you deload appropriately so that you're continuing to make progress, and also what your peaking protocol looks like for a competition. So similar to deloads, some athletes, generally if you're a bigger, stronger, more powerful athlete, you need a longer peaking and a longer tapering, versus if you're a little bit more of an aerobic organism, not the strongest, crayon in the box, you don't need as long of a taper or a peaking block because your central nervous system is just going to recover a little better. And those are those individual differences that a coach is going to learn with you as a one-on-one athlete to help you maximize your potential for those off-season competitions or the open or quarterfinals or semis or the games.
Yeah, awesome. Mahmoud, let's hand it over to you real quick for a second. Let's just talk about how can individualized programming and coaching benefit me as an athlete at any level? So do I have to be trying to pursue the games for one-on-one to be a fit, or do we work with athletes with all different variations of goals and experience levels?
That's a great question. And honestly, yes, as a very competitive athlete, I would encourage you to pursue a one-on-one coach, just to make sure that you're maximizing out on your benefits. But more importantly, if you are a person who have not done much technique work, or you don't really care about doing, for example, Olympic weightlifting, and you feel like you're left out in any CrossFit gym, or if you're a person who just came back from an injury and you cannot really comply to any programming, whether it's in person or remote in a template or on a blog or in a gym, or if you're even a person that have special requirements in whether it's I want to get stronger for now, I don't really care about this season's open. So again, you're going to feel like you're not getting your focus one-on-one based on what you see in any gym that is preparing for a season, or that is just going for a GPP, or, and again, any blog that is cyclical. That's probably another very good reason for you to pursue a one-on-one coaching. So I have a lot of athletes that, one, they are coming back from not working out. They are just trying to get back into the habit of working out, trying to build their just fitness base, and potentially lose some weight in the process. I have some athletes that are coming back from an injury. Have an athlete that has a lower back injury or a shoulder labrum injury, and they're just trying to, some of them, they are trying to want to do CrossFit pretty much follow the blog just with minor modifications, and some of them, they just want to completely do something different. I have some athletes that are requiring some specific focus. So I have an athlete that requires gymnastics progressions in specific multiple, like he has goals for multiple different movements at the same time, and they still want to do our classes. He becomes our affiliate, so he wants to do the classes and add on top of it some individualized accessories for him to be better at that. And that all comes with very high accountability, very high communication with your coach. You have somebody in your corner. It's not just about, oh, I'm trying to create the super athlete, but at the same time, most people, especially who are either coming back from injury or coming back from not working out or require specific attention, they will feel a little bit either left out or discouraged if they're working out on their own, or if they're just not finding what they want in a class or in a blog, and they feel like they need that special attention for them to either improve or build a healthy habit of fitness.
Yeah, so I think a big thing that you're kind of touching on is a really big advantage of one-on-one coaching is that accountability. You really will have, we do regular check-ins, regular calls with athletes that are one-on-one athletes to talk about how progress is going from a skill standpoint, from metrics and numbers, but also mentally, how are we feeling? How are we checking in? Are you enjoying training? How many days did we show up? How's recovery? It really fully encompasses the entire athlete in the package versus just programming for the skills and nuts and bolts kind of CrossFit. A big thing that I want to touch on here that we get asked really frequently, and you guys can kind of hop in and touch on this as well, is on the website, if you go and apply for one-on-one, because we do an application process, so that way we can best match you with different coaches first on your strengths and weaknesses, is I get asked what's the difference between a BaseRage and a PeakRage coach, because we do have two options on the website. So base coaching is $189.99 a month, and peak coaching is $259.99 a month. The difference there in rate and which coaches are kind of seated into which rate is level of education and experience. So all of our peak ranked coaches have 4-year degrees in relevant fields or more. Dr. Mahmood down there. Plug.
Appreciate it.
That's legit.
No, Mahmood does have a PhD in kinesiology.
Yeah.
So he's kind of special. But all of our peak ranked coaches do have 4-year degrees in relevant fields and are professional coaches. This is what we do for a living. This is our only job. This is our passion. This is what we have chosen to educate ourselves in and pursue. And also have proven experience with that as well. Have coached athletes before at varying different levels, gotten athletes to the goals that we are getting from the different athletes. And that's part of the application process. So we can know your goal to help place you with the best coach. Our base rank coaches are also very experienced. Most of them are aspiring to be career coaches and still building their education and level experience. So they're very capable. We do have a coaching education program that Coach Tristan is helping head out to help onboard our base rank coaches, and they're all overseen by Tristan. But they are still building their education and level experience with remote coaching. Tristan, let's talk just a little bit more about one-on-one coaching from the highest level of competition. So Mahmood kind of talked about how it can be an advantage for our athletes that maybe don't have as big a competitive goals and how it can be customized. And let's talk about what our athletes that are shooting for CrossFit Games, the value and what they're getting from one-on-one.
Yeah. So when we look at those high-level athletes, who are games level or games contenders at a semifinal level, and they're getting a one-on-one programming, I think the biggest focus is finding the small margins for improvement. And a lot of the times I feel like with those athletes, it's really not a fitness thing or a capacity thing. It really comes into how are you moving on a given movement, right? How are your legless rope climbs, right? This is a fantastic example we can use from this last year. If you are efficient at legless rope climbs, you're going to have a much better placing in that workout from semis than if you're not efficient. If you're just following a template program and I write legless rope climbs, you're just going to do legless rope climbs. But if you have a one-on-one coach and I program legless rope climbs and I say, I want to see video of your legless rope climbs, and then I see your legless rope climbs, I'm going to be like, oh, okay. We have some things we can improve here that will make you a lot faster and more efficient, which that small thing at that level can be a big difference. Yeah. Right. The other thing I would say, two other things I would say is one, movement prioritization. A lot of times high-level athletes, right now we're in that preseason time, so GPP is still a big thing. We talked about that on the Alps podcast. But for high-level athletes, when we start to approach the season, the open doesn't matter, let's be honest. most of those athletes don't have too much to worry about in quarterfinals. The structure's changed. We can't we don't know, but most of those athletes are pretty sure they're going to be fine at quarterfinals. So you can really take a lot of time and just hammer the weaknesses that they have that might be holding them back, whether that's handstand walking the ramp, handstand push-ups, ring muscle up volume, snatching a barbell under fatigue, maximal strength, right, with a barbell in their snatch and clean and jerk, or even one of the base lifts. And it's easier for a one-on-one coach with one of those athletes to just cut out the fluff. It's like, I know you're good at burpees. Who gives a shit? It's not a big thing. Like, I don't care, right? Versus just having that blog program, which is very, very good and very, very well-rounded, but that increase in frequency for those competitive athletes at that level can go a really long way, right? And then the other thing is helping those level of athletes build confidence in themselves, right? So many times I feel like a lot of the high level athletes still tend to doubt themselves a little bit. And this has been a big talk around, CrossFit Greater Heights and our Ascend HQ. And the coach that we've been talking about a lot is, I want you to mess up in training. Because I think especially with athletes at that level, more often than not, they're going to surprise themselves with what they can actually do. We just had a bike chest to bar piece yesterday for everybody. And it's one of those things where I know high level competitive athletes who are games level that we coach, who would be like, I'm going to really chill on this bike so I can make sure I do these chest to bar unbroken. And having an individual coach be like, why are you afraid of this number of chest to bar?
Right.
I want you to push the bike and trust your chest to bar. Because then when you successfully do it, which you probably will, you're going to have confidence building from that the next time you see a bike in a piece with chest to bar or another vertical pulling movement on the rig and things like that. So helping athletes almost flip the script when they get to that high level, when we're quarterfinals level, trying to make semifinals, it's more, okay, I need to game this appropriately for my capacity so that I don't blow up. When we get back to the games level, it almost starts to switch a little bit. Those athletes tend to have such a high level of capacity that we need to be like, hey, you can go faster on that bike. And that's where the time's going to get made up for you, because everybody's going unbroken.
Yeah.
It's not a thing anymore. Everybody's going unbroken. So
right.
we have to flip that script a little bit. And it's just a different mindset from what the previous level of training they needed to do to get into that space. You almost have to switch it to maximize your potential in that field.
Yeah. So what you're saying is it's kind of like a continuum of how you're going to attack a workout as you get further into your training years and development. Yeah. In the beginning, where you're just finding out, right? Like, you just started training. There is no such thing as pacing a workout. You're just doing the workout and finding out what happens. You're training. Once you get to kind of compete, you maybe have a base level of all those skills, but you possibly have some capacity limiters in them. Like, let's say strict handstand push-ups, that if you go out too hot, at some point they're going to go away and they're just not going to come back, because we haven't fully had the training background and history to develop capacity there. Once we get to the actual pro level, when there's no longer skill limiters, it becomes much more about capacity and turning that brain off and kind of pushing the edge of what's capable every single day. And kind of, we use this term, forgive me, Mom, in the gym, but let's kind of fuck around and find out, right?
Yeah.
And that's what training at that level for those athletes should be, is almost letting go of some of the fear of what will happen and staring it right in the face and trying to walk towards it. Because it's human nature to kind of back away in those moments, right? When it really starts to hurt. And to truly be successful in this sport and compete at the highest level, you have to be the person that's willing to shut that off, shut all the signals off that I should stop, I should slow down, and trust your training and keep going.
Yeah.
So I think that's a huge advantage of one-on-one coaching at that highest level, is having someone that knows you well enough to know that you really don't have to pace this to be afraid of the skill and your capacity in this skill, that we're going to go for it. And you know what? If it falls apart, we're going to make a note of it and we're going to train to that capacity line next week and kind of keep pushing that forward.
Yep.
Awesome. Do we have anything else to add, guys, about kind of what we have to offer from the whole breadth of it, from blog up to one-on-ones and kind of?
Oh, she gone again. Go ahead, Mahmood.
Well, I got a question for you. We're talking about one-on-one training. How do you feel about, or what do you have to say about one-on-one training for teams that are trying to make it to the games?
For teams?
Yeah.
I think it's a great idea. Because when we look at a team, you're only as good as the, sum of the whole, right? Like you having a one-on-one coach helping oversee a team, one, you're going to be able to, in a time like this in the preseason, prioritize individual weaknesses, right? We're still going to get teamwork exposure. We're still going to do, play with the worm a little bit and things like that. I don't care what anybody says. The reason Rich and them were so good is they trained together with the worm 365 days a year for the entire year. And that's why we're so dominant. You DM me and we can argue out there. So, but for a team right now, you can have that team exposure and those team movements, whether they're worm workouts or not. And then you can also have a coach writing some specific individual pieces for you guys to work on individual weaknesses, which is a huge thing for any team because obviously everybody's going to have limiters in different areas, right? You're not going to have a team of Rich, Matt, Tia, and Tia again or whatever. So everything. So, having a coach help kind of oversee that. And then also having a coach help oversee kind of the team dynamics can be really, really helpful. Like so-and-so doesn't want to do this, or so-and-so thinks we should break it up this way. And so-and-so thinks to say that. And then the coach says, okay, I've listened to all of you. I have all this data from watching you train and seeing your workouts and seeing your scores. Here's how we're going to do it today. And then we learn from that, right? And it takes away a little bit of the tension you might find in some teams because it's a third party. It's like, I'm not doing the workout. I'm just going to tell you what you're going to do, right?
Yeah. And it's, as you said, like it takes away from the drama that might happen. Somebody like taking the lead or something like that in the team. And then also like, I think because, we all know that especially on the competitive level, when you're training and you are not following like a specific tailored for you program and you're on a team, you're going to want to do whatever everybody else is doing. Mm-hmm. And sometimes, or most of the times, it's not the best idea for you. So I think having like team training and then kind of like branching off to individual pieces would be, okay, I have something to do for myself. And if I'm doing something else, I'm not doing what's written for me. Yeah, I think that would help a lot.
I think that was a great question, Mahmood, and kind of piggybacking off of that as well, is I want to point out one thing. Great individual athletes make a great team, but to truly have a team that excels, the training is different than if your goal is to excel at the individual level. Programming for a really great team athlete should look more like an emphasis on power output, an emphasis on sprint and recovery. Most of the time, our goal as an individual athlete is really riding that 80-85% effort and kind of duration for as long as we can kind of hang on to that. For a team athlete, a lot of times training needs to look like how close can we teeter on the edge of a max set of max effort, and then how quickly can we recover from that. So it's a lot more interval rest to work type of programming that's going to benefit an athlete with team goals versus kind of some of that individualized pacing. How should I break this workout up to make the most sense for me?
Yeah, that's something you and I talked about last year during the competitive season. We had our games team jump in on a workout which was quite long, and like quarterfinals level athletes beat them on that, but they were just not
I was like, when's my rest? When do I get to trade out for Kelly?
Right, just hadn't trained that energy system. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just the way, a team is going to be typically tested in the sport is significantly different than an individual.
Yeah, so that can be a really, really, and I think that's a piece that's missed a lot by teams whenever you're following whatever programming, is that really the nuts and the bolts of the programming and the intent of what you're trying to develop should be a little bit different for a team athlete versus an individual athlete. Cool. Okay, guys, I think we're about ready to wrap it up. Any last pointers to kind of throw out there? Mahmood, you got anything? I think Kristen is frozen.
Yeah. No, I think that's all. Again, you have so many tracks to choose from. Whatever fits you the best. Especially like even if you're an affiliate or you're a head coach of an affiliate and trying to like take the burden off of programming for your gym or something like that, or you need guidance and help with that. If you're a team, if you're an individual trying to make it to the games, if you're an individual who just wants to work out 3 days a week, but you need some guidance there, we offer all of those tracks for you. If you are pregnant or postpartum, trying to recover back to your fitness, whatever your fitness is. So I feel like there's no barrier of entry to our offers or to our services. You don't have to be fit enough to do something like that. We help you to get fit. Whether you want to make it to the games, whether you want to start working out, we are there for you.
Yeah. I apologize. The power just went out in my apartment. So
Oh gosh.
it came right back on, but my Wi-Fi. So I got on my phone, my hotspot. One thing I wanted to circle back to super quick is what we were talking about with peak and base coaches. Just, I know we said like every, peak coach has a 4-year degree and a lot of experience and things like that, but just something that I think is important to highlight that really separates our peak level coaches from maybe other one-on-one coaches in the space is all of our peak coaches have a very high level understanding of physiology and exercise physiology and training. And it's a big thing of the reason they're peak coaches is their ability to marry those two things together and understand what needs to be prescribed for an athlete on a physiological level versus balancing that with what we need to do in the sport. Mm-hmm. So those things are not mutually exclusive. And I think something that is missed oftentimes with coaches in our space is, they just know that CrossFit works. So they do a lot of CrossFit and that's fine. Risking sounding a little bit rough around the edges. If you throw enough shit at a wall, a lot of it's going to stick. But understanding what's actually happening with somebody's physiology and knowing how to leverage that in their training to make them better at a sport is kind of a big difference. There's a big difference there. And I think that's something important to highlight. We could have a whole nother podcast on that whole thing, but I wanted to circle back to that.
Awesome. That's a really good point. Okay, well, I think that's about all we got for today. We touched on all those different blog options, our specialty programming options, and one-on-one. If you are interested in finding out more about Ascend, reach out to us. Email is all of our first names at ascendathletetraining.com. You can check out all of those different offerings a little bit more in depth at our website, ascendathletetraining.com. Reach out to us on Instagram. We're very active in the DMs. We've got all of our little Instagram handles up there on the screen if you want to talk to one of us individually. Okay, all of us here on screen are peak coaches, so we will know what we're talking about and we will direct you and get you to the program that fits you best. So, all right, guys, thanks for joining me. I'll see you next week. Chat again.
Next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.